Good afternoon. This is Jonathan with Payroll Services. Today, we're going to go over just some ACA basic facts. As companies grow or they, add employees, this is a common thing where people just forget or they don't know about because ACA is it's not top of mind anymore. So as you know, ACA, most people understand this as Obamacare, was passed by President Obama, and it's been in place for several years. So this is not something new. It's just something that businesses end up having to deal with. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit of what makes you eligible or required rather to deal with the ACA. So the ACA is really targeted to companies with over 50 or more full-time equivalents. A full-time equivalent is simply how many employees do you have in your office that would equate to full-timers, all right? So this gets confused because every time we talk to people, they go, well, I only have, 30 full-time employees, but I have 50 part-timers. It's not about how many actual full-time employees you have, it's how many hours that are being worked in the organization. So for example, if you have two part-timers that work 15 hours a week, that's a total of 30 hours between those two, that equates to one full-time equivalent. So you have to add all your part-timers up, figure out, divided by 30, and figure out how many full-time employees that you have based on your part-timers. And then you go back and you add your full-time employees. If you're over 50, if you're 50 or more FTEs, you are now considered an applicable large employer, and the ACA is now something you have to deal with. So that's really the basics of it. Let's get into what the ACA means. So now that you are actually having to deal with this, what do you have to do? It's all about qualifying coverage. Okay, I'm sure everybody understands and remembers the big debates that went on with this, but there's essentially three aspects that employers have to be aware of. Typically, when you get a health plan through Care First or Aetna or UHC or whatever, they meet most of these requirements. The two biggest requirements are what's called a minimal essential coverage and then minimal value. Those two are actually statistically defined by actuaries, whether a plan qualifies or not. If you don't offer a plan that has minimum essential coverage, we call that MEC, or a minimum value, an MV plan, you do risk penalties. These are the basics of the qualifying offer that you have to make. The next thing you have to make sure that it's affordable. Affordable is actually a mathematic definition based on whatever the affordable percentage is at the time. In this slide, we have it at 9.83%, but that does increase over time. What that means is that the premiums or the amount that the employee is paying cannot exceed a certain percentage of their wages. If it does, it's considered not affordable, and you do risk getting penalized again for it. Okay, so that's really what the crux of it is. Now, before we kind of get into the next section, I want to kind of make a comment about health insurance, about large groups and small groups. Once you have 50 full-time equivalents, you are considered a large group in the terms of health insurance coverage. This is very important because many businesses we encounter are over the 50 threshold and they are written as a small group, which is wrong. Okay, it is not in compliance. You risk having your health plan canceled, as well as other penalties and other difficulties with the administration. It doesn't matter what other brokers are telling you. Once you are over 50 full-time employees, you must be written as a large group. There's actually a form that comes out every year that asks you what your FTE count is. If you indicate you are over 50 employees, then you would be quoted as a large group. So the only way that you are as a small group is if that document is not completed accurately. Okay, the differences between large group and small group are very simple. In large group, you have the standard statuses that you're used to. That's employee only, husband and wife, children, or family coverage. With small group, every person that's on your plan, including their dependents that are enrolled, have their own independent rate based on their age. That is why once you qualify or required to take care of ACA, it's really important that you are written properly through a large group rather than a small group, because it does matter as part of the calculations. So now that you have found out that, yep, you're an ALE and you got to deal with this, how does this work? So There's 3 different periods that work inside the ACA, and then there's reporting at the end of the year. We take care of reporting for the ACA for our customers, but we have 3 different periods. We have what's called the measurement period, the administrative period, and the stability period. All these 3 periods blend together into this compliance. And I'll just kind of make it very simple for you. Think of the administrative period as your eligibility to enroll. Maybe they have to wait 60 days, okay? The stability period is simply your renewal date. So if your plan renews in August, it's 8/1 to 8/1 or whatever the 12-month period is for there. The measurement period is a little bit tricky, and this is where a lot of people get confused. So a measurement period essentially says that we don't know if this employee is considered full-time or not, because if they are full-time, you have to offer them coverage. Otherwise, you get penalized. So whenever an hourly employee is hired, it is our advice to always classify them as what we call a variable employee. A variable employee means I don't know and I won't know until the employee finishes their measurement period. This does basically prolong the time the employee has to wait before they can take health insurance. So there are some drawbacks for it depending on what you're trying to achieve. Typically, a measurement period is 12 months from the date of hire of an employee. So you measure an employee for 12 months, you figure out if they actually meet the ACA guidelines as being an eligible full-time employee. If they do, they enter into the administrative period where they have to get enrolled or they waive coverage. If they enroll in coverage, then they're in the stability period for 12 months. Okay, so this is one of those things that kind of ping pongs around and is not consistent for every single employee. On this next slide, we have just a very simple example so you can see. In this example, our stability period is 8/1, which coincides with our renewal. And then we have an administrative period, which is our eligibility period to get them enrolled. And then we have the measurement period beforehand. And we always start with what the renewal date of the health insurance is, and we kind of build these blocks backwards so we can figure out what your original measurement, administration, and stability period are. These were supposed to be defined several years ago, but it's okay. A lot of businesses haven't defined them, so we have to go back and redefine that for them. So that's pretty simple there. Now on our last slide, kind of what happens with ACA and why you have to pay attention to it is it's all about penalties. And so there's a theory, what we call pay or play penalties, okay? The theory essentially is do you play in the health insurance arena or do you pay the penalties? With this, there's 2 different types of penalties that you can get penalized on. One is what we call a Section A penalty, and then the other one is a Section B penalty. So a Section A penalty is if we fail to offer a minimum essential coverage plan, a MEC, to our employees. That is the biggest penalty. If you don't offer a MEC, it's pretty substantial. Every full-time employee would count towards that penalty calculation. We then have a Section B penalty, which means that we didn't offer an affordable or a plan that met minimum value. That penalty is a little bit more forgiving because you only get assessed it for employees that go to the state exchange. So when we take a look at businesses, we want to take a look to see what does it do to make sense to put into place for protections. Sometimes it makes sense to just put in a plan that satisfies the Section A penalty, so we don't have to worry about that. And then we risk the Section B penalty, which can be, again, a lot lighter. What I want to kind of just let you know with this is if you are an ALE, this is not something to play around with. It is substantial. The IRS does go after people for ACA penalties. The way that they know about it is very simple, is that if once you start reporting your ACA forms 1095, which is our annual report we have to file for these, and then the states report back who went to the exchange, that essentially flags this. So it is something that you do want to address, and we just wanted to kind of go over some of the basics of it. This is not a full in-depth how-to on ACA. We just want to make sure that you can at least understand it and speak to it at a surface level so you understand what the ACA involves. If you have any questions, please call us. Our number is at the bottom of the screen. You can also visit us at our website at payrollservicesllc.com. This is Jonathan Pocious. Thank you so much for watching.